This is the Kia EV9. It is an electric 3-row SUV that I've been living with for the past 2 weeks. I've done a 700-kilometer road trip in it, I've taken it grocery shopping, I've driven it back and forth to work, and I've really tested out all of its features, and I'm ready to talk to you about it, because there's a few things that I don't really like, and a lot of stuff I love, so let's get into it. First, let's talk about the looks real quick. I think this is one of the best looking SUVs on the road right now. It's definitely got that futuristic, cubey, boxy shape, and it's accentuated with some sharp lines all over the car. There's lots of cool little design elements on the outside of the EV9, but in the interest of time, we're going to stick with the 3 that I think make it unique. The front grille, the lights, and then basically the entire side of the car, because there's a lot going on there that I want to talk about. Number 1 is the light show that goes on in the front grille of this car. Every time you unlock the car, the EV9 plays this little animation on the inside of the headlights, and it looks incredible. The video really doesn't do it justice. There's a full array of LEDs here with tiny perforations in the paint that allows it to shine through. Definitely not a necessary feature, but it helps the EV9 stand out for sure. Number 2 is the headlights themselves. These things are super quirky. The daytime running lights almost have like this lightning bolt pattern to them, and the headlights have auto on and off high beams with this really cool feature that actually disables segments of the LEDs for oncoming traffic so that you don't blind them. It's really hard to get on camera, but you can actually see it happening in real time when you're on the road at night. And then number 3 is basically the entire side profile of this car, which I absolutely love. You've got these massive 21-inch alloy aero wheels, these octagonal trim pieces around the wheel wells, and so many sharp lines all over the place. The rear window line actually matches the angle of the rear spoiler, and it gives it an even more aggressive look. The door handles also retract into the car when it's locked and when you're driving. I don't know, is this the best looking EV SUV from the side profile? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, before we take this monstrosity out on the road for a drive, let's talk about the interior. This is a really nice place to be. I have the GT line, so there's a few extra goodies in here compared to the base model car, but all EV9s have pretty nice interiors regardless of the trim package. Everywhere you normally put your hands and arms are met with soft touch materials, and all of the buttons and switches are laid out in an intuitive and easy to reach spot, with the exception of the climate control touchscreen thing, but we'll get to that in a sec. The powered white and black seats in this GT line look very nice and are basically infinitely adjustable with the buttons down by the seat base. The seats are heated and cooled, and the driver's seat even gets a massage function that definitely came in handy on my road trip last week. We'll talk about the charging situation a little bit later in the review, but while I was charging the car last week, I took advantage of the EV9's recliner function that basically turns your seat into a couch recliner with a leg rest and everything. It's super comfortable. Also, side note, these may be the most ergonomic and cushy headrests I've ever had the pleasure of laying my head on. They're really quite nice. The infotainment is pretty great. It comes with wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as standard, and the interface is modern and very fast to navigate through. This is a 12.3-inch touchscreen, and it's so wide that it can actually be a little bit tough to reach the far side. And I'm 6'2", so my arms are not short. But I do like the size and overall resolution of the screen. What I really don't care for is the climate control screen. You do get hard buttons for most of this stuff, like temperature, fan speed, and for where the air comes out, but for everything else, you have to use this little screen, which is obfuscated by this chunky steering wheel. I can see maybe 40% of the screen at any given time, and it's pretty annoying to use or see what's going on. Kia did think of this though, because if you hit this little button up here, it expands to the main screen where you can control everything a little bit easier. Just below the main screen, there are some buttons for navigation of the infotainment screen and then a little volume wheel for music. I'm glad that they put these buttons here, but I'm not at all a fan of the implementation. These are not real buttons. They're like capacitive touchscreen buttons that have haptic feedback to them when you press them. The problem is that you have to press them a little too hard, even when the sensitivity is set to high, and the haptic feedback is really cheap feeling, to be honest. You can also hear the creak of the hard plastic when you push on it, which doesn't really inspire confidence, especially for the price of this SUV. The rest of this interior is quite smart though, and there's a huge amount of storage. You've got covered storage that turns into cup holders, storage for your phone with a wireless charger, storage under the armrest, a massive amount of storage under the center console, storage behind the center console for the rear passengers, which actually turns into a little tray table. You got storage in the door bins, storage in the seat pocket, storage under the hood in the front, and then of course a massive amount of storage in the rear when you fold those seats down. The rear seats in this GT line are all powered, so they lower with this little console here. It's a bit slow, but they all fold down flat for a grand total of 81.7 cubic feet of storage space. There's so much space back here that you could easily sleep in it. It feels like the bed of a pickup truck. When those seats aren't folded down, there is a ton of room for the rear passengers. Well, for the second row passengers at least. I'm 6'2", and there's loads of room back here for me, and I have the driver's seat set for my driving position. Not only is there room, but the back seats here are nearly as comfy as the ones up front. They recline and have their own leg rests, and I even get my own climate control panel up here, which controls the ventilated air coming from the roof. I also get heated and cooled seats back here in the GT line. This would actually make one hell of a luxurious Uber. The third row seating is a bit more cramped. I probably wouldn't fit a fully grown adult back here for long, but for kids it would be just fine. There's also ISOFIX mounting points both on the second and third row seats, so you should have no trouble securing car seats. Kia also has some pretty clever features built into the car that helps when you have rear passengers. There's this thing called passenger talk, where it projects your voice all the way back to the third row using the microphone and speakers. It makes it a lot easier to talk to the kids without having to shout. There's also some UI built into the gauge cluster that tells you not only when someone has unbuckled their seatbelt, but exactly where that person is sitting too. So there's no more fights about which sibling unbuckled themselves while on the road. There's a ton of more stuff I could talk about with regards to the interior, but I want to move on to driving and charging this thing, so here's a quick mashup of the other features that this EV9 has. On the center console, there's a fingerprint reader that you can use to unlock the infotainment system and start the car. There are USB-C ports absolutely everywhere in this car. Everywhere you look, you can find another one tucked away hiding out. There's also the vehicle to load system, which gives you a 15 amp power outlet that runs right off the main battery of the car. If you have passengers in the rear and they need a little more space, there are buttons on the left-hand side of the front passenger seat for moving it forward or backwards and changing the seat back angle. You get an opening sunroof in the front for the front occupants and a fixed glass one in the back with a motorized sunshade for the rear passengers. The built-in 14-speaker Meridian sound system in this GT line sounds pretty amazing. The bass is nice and deep and the mids and highs are very clear. It's not quite as refined as the Harman Kardon sound system in my Cooper SE, but this 3-row is a lot bigger and it has to do a lot more work. At night, the interior looks even more premium. There's ambient lighting absolutely everywhere. You can turn that down if it bothers you, but I kind of like it. I'll tell you what else I like: driving it. If I had to describe the EV9 in a singular word with regards to the driving experience, I would say it's comfortable. You almost feel a little disconnected from the drive at times, and for a car enthusiast that might not interest you, but for the average Joe just taking their kids back and forth to work, that is a truly fantastic thing. They must have done a lot of work with the suspension dampening on this thing because it's 5,000 pounds. It's a very heavy vehicle, and they've done a fantastic job, I've got to say. It is one of the quietest vehicles I've ever driven, and not just from the road noise either, from the wind noise as well. Even when you're on the highway, it's very, very quiet in this cabin, and that is a really good thing. The Kia EV9 is also equipped with Highway Driving Assist 2, which actually somewhat drives the car itself without you having to do anything when you're on the highway, and it can see the painted lines on the road. It also keeps its distance with the car in front of you with the adaptive cruise control. I tried both on my 700-kilometer road trip, and they worked really well. There was actually like a 70 or 80-kilometer stretch of highway where it didn't disengage at all. It just did everything for me for that 70 to 80-kilometer trek, and it's really good and really comfortable to have that sort of feature when you're on the highway. When you're driving the EV9, it actually doesn't feel nearly as big as it truly is. The only time you really feel the size and the weight of this thing is when you're going around corners at a fairly high speed. Then you can really feel the weight come in there. But most people are not going to drive this thing like a maniac. Now, I don't recommend doing this very often because if you've got backseat passengers, they're probably going to lose their lunch. But if you really want to put your foot down, this thing gets up to speed way too fast for something that weighs this much. The 0 to 60 is 4.5 seconds, which is crazy for something that weighs this much and is this big. Now, like I said, the EV9 is very quiet, but if you wanted to add just a little bit more drama to your drive, there is a feature in here called active sound design, and if you turn that all the way up, it's a strange electric-y fake sound. I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but you let me know what you think in the comments below. Another area where you really don't feel the size of the EV9 is when you go to park it. I mean, this is a 3-row SUV that's as big as most pickup trucks, and it is not hard to park at all. It has a really good turning radius for such a big vehicle. It can actually park itself as well. but it's not very good at doing that. I tried circling a couple of parking lots and finding some parking spaces, and it kind of hesitated too much and took way too long, so I'd rather park it myself. And given the fact that it is really easy to park, I'd 100% rather do it myself than wait for the system to try and figure out how to do it. When it comes to charging, the EV9 is one of the fastest charging EVs out there, as long as your local charging infrastructure supports it, of course. On a 350 kilowatt charger, the EV9 is supposed to be able to go from 10% to 80% in just 24 minutes. Unfortunately, I couldn't test that, as the level 3 chargers local to me can only do a maximum of around 60 kilowatts, and I was only drawing around 40 to 50 kilowatts from them when I was charging up. That means that my charging sessions were around an hour to an hour and a half long, which really isn't great on a road trip scenario. You probably have faster chargers near you though, so that's less likely to be a problem. In my 2 weeks with the car, the EV9 actually got pretty great range and efficiency figures. The average efficiency during my 2 weeks with the car that involved a fair bit of both city and highway driving was 4.6 kilometers per kilowatt hour. The EV9 in this GT trim has 96 kilowatt hours of usable battery capacity, so that's around 441 kilometers or 274 miles of range on average. Not bad for a huge 5,000 pound brick on wheels. All right, let's go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of this Kia EV9, starting with the good. The interior is luxurious, comfortable, and very roomy. The infotainment and tech features are absolutely excellent, and there's a ton of safety-oriented tech too, like the blind spot monitoring and cameras, collision sensing, emergency braking, parking sensors, lane keep assist, and lots more. It's fast. It is stupidly fast for a 3-row SUV and insanely quiet on the road too, and it gets decent range for a large EV. Now the bad. The lock and unlock feature on the door handles is not very consistent. Sometimes it takes more than one try to unlock the door with your thumb on the handle. Same with the power liftgate. It's actually supposed to automatically open when you stand behind it with the key fob, but it only works sometimes. The lane departure is way too sensitive. It's fine on the highway, but on the rural roads, especially ones that are a little bit beaten up, the wheel kind of yanks you left and right all the time because it thinks you're off the road. And finally, the ugly. There's really just one of these, and it's the price. This GT line model will set you back a cool $75,000 US dollars, or here in Canada, $79,000. That's before taxes, dealer fees, and EV rebates, of course. That's a lot of money for a car. Then again, it is competing with the likes of the Rivian R1S, the Volvo EX90, and the Tesla Model X, which are all very expensive vehicles. Personally, I recommend you take a look at the base trim of the EV9. It's a lot cheaper. It's somewhere around 56K USD or 60 or 61K Canadian. You're going to lose some of the stuff that's more luxurious on the GT line, and it's definitely not going to be as fast, but it's still really well equipped. Maybe do a little bit of cross shopping on Kia's website to see if there's some things you can do without on the base trim. Either way, the Kia EV9 gets 2 massive thumbs up from me. It's a fantastic EV. It's one of the best I've ever tested. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.